All right, it's 6:05. We will go ahead and get started. Want to welcome everyone to our meeting and our virtual open house as we talk about the Central Avenue Bridge Replacement Project. My name is Stacy Miller and I'm with Circle Point, helping lead the public outreach and communication efforts for this project. Tonight, we will go through a brief presentation and leave a bunch of time for Q&A. We want to hear your questions at the end of the presentation and look forward to being able to answer all your questions and share more information with you. Want to go over a few ground rules before we get started. The meeting is being recorded and we will be sharing this on our project website in the near future. So for anyone who missed it, you will have an opportunity to view it at a later date. I want to remind you of a couple of the ground rules for our Q&A. The Q&A icon is in the Zoom platform. Go ahead and click on that and type your questions in. We will get to as many questions as we can tonight. Want to remind you that all perspectives are welcome. No question is too basic to ask, so please go ahead and type it in the Q&A feature. We will respond to one question at a time, and we want to make sure that remind you if we deem it to be inappropriate, we will not answer the question tonight, but we want to give everyone the opportunity to participate and ask your questions. And I will start by introducing the project team. We have Noel Castillo from the City of Montclair on, who's going to start with the introduction to the project, as well as Eric Pfeiffer with Biggs Cardoza, who's the project manager leading the team for the consultant team. And for that, I will turn it over to Noel Castillo to share a little bit more information.
So good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this evening to allow us to present and introduce the project to you, and let us guide you through the steps we will take to make this project come to fruition. The city was successful in obtaining a highway bridge program grant in the bridge replacement project. So the first step taken was performing a feasibility study for us to figure out exactly what we'll be able to do or what we need to do to replace the bridge. So the feasibility study is a planning level document to guide the design process. In it, we looked at different alternatives, and it also allowed us, the feasibility study made the recommendations to guide the preparation to requests for design services. So we sent out a request for proposals. Biggs Cardoza and Associates, BCA, was awarded the design contract to create the final design documents. And the goal is to get done with those documents by the middle of 2022, so we can go into construction. Next slide. The project location. So Central is the gateway to the city. The bridge itself is centrally located, pun intended, in the middle of the city between Holt and Mission Boulevards. Next slide. The bridge spans Union Pacific Railroad and State Street. There are many challenges and logistics to overcome during construction. So BCA is preparing a complete construction project that keeps our residents in mind, minimizes the inconveniences, provisions for traffic concerns, and provides for alternate routes for the commuting public. With that, I will turn it over to Eric with BCA to provide more details on the description of the improvements and how we'll accomplish them. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Noel. So as Noel mentioned, Central is a really critical route for the city. It's one of the principal arterials in the city, and it connects to State Route 60 to the south and I-10 to the north. The existing bridge has 4 travel lanes separated by a raised median, a sidewalk on the east side only, and no designated bike lanes. Safety has really been a concern along this segment here. There's been at least 19 accidents reported since 2014. And because of the vehicle congestion too, there's been delays in emergency vehicle response times. So this project seeks to address that. Central carries roughly 31,000 vehicles per day. And it's really close to the county threshold for a 6-lane segment, which is 31,100. So 100 additional vehicles, and we need a 6-lane facility. So as you can imagine, as growth continues in the region, Central will certainly need to be a 6-lane facility. And we should also note that the segments both north and south have 6 lanes. So this segment creates a bit of a bottleneck. Along with the roadway deficiencies, the bridge also has some deficiencies with respect to the railroad. Union Pacific Railroad, Amtrak, Metrolink all have clearance requirements that are currently not met by the existing bridge and that this project will address. The minimum vertical clearance that the bridge provides is about 23 feet, 23'4" is desired, and the bridge supports are located in close proximity to the tracks. Some of them have crash protection walls, other supports do not, and Union Pacific Railroad requires that all supports within 25 feet be crash protected to avoid a potentially dangerous situation in the event of a train derail. The bridge was built in 1967. Typically, bridges have a lifespan of about 75 years, so this bridge is nearing the end of its design life and requires rehabilitation or replacement. Typically, bridges are inspected every 2 years and receive a sufficiency rating based on rating certain elements like the deck, the columns, other features. And so this bridge, based on the most recent inspection, has a sufficiency rating of 45.2 out of 100. The condition of the deck prompted this bridge being rated as structurally deficient. And under the Highway Bridge Program, which is administered by a branch of Caltrans called Local Assistance, bridges are eligible for federal funding if they have a sufficiency rating less than 80 and a structurally deficient flag. So this bridge is eligible and is funded by the Highway Bridge Program. All this being said, don't let this alarm you. The bridge is certainly safe for continued operation. The structurally deficient flag and the low sufficiency rating are just indicators that this bridge should be prioritized for replacement, but don't indicate that there's any imminent danger. Along with addressing the structural issues, this project will also seek to improve that vertical clearance requirement to 23'4". So the purpose of this project is to address the deficiencies I just mentioned. Next slide, please. By replacing the aging and structurally deficient bridge, the city's evaluated rehabilitation and replacement options, and replacement was a preferred option. This will help improve the state's infrastructure report card by replacing the bridge. We'll also be able to improve traffic flow and safety by widening the bridge, reducing vehicle congestion, and also providing dedicated pedestrian and cyclist facilities on both sides of the bridge for improved access and safety as well. So this shows the typical roadway section on the top compared to the existing configuration on the bottom. We're providing 6 travel lanes, 3 in each direction, separated by a raised median. There'll be class 2 bike lanes in the shoulders, going both northbound and southbound, and sidewalks on both sides. So along with the east side, the sidewalk on the east side, there'll also be a sidewalk on the west side to serve the businesses and residents along the west side of Central Ave. For the proposed bridge type, the city and the design team evaluated a number of steel and concrete bridge options, and we arrived at a type called a haunch steel girder bridge. For this type of bridge, the depth varies along its length. And so what that means is that instead of having to raise the roadway profile quite a bit and build taller embankments, we can actually keep the roadway almost where it is today. So typically when you go to a longer span with less supports, you'd have a deeper structure to maintain the vertical clearance, and that would impact residents and businesses. By using this structure type, we're able to limit the impacts to adjacent businesses and residents by maintaining the roadway profile as it is today. The picture on the bottom shows a sample of this structure type. That one's over a waterway. So you can imagine Central Ave will be similar, except it will be over a railroad instead of a waterway. The bridge will be supported on cast and drill hole concrete piles. Why this is important is that it really has a lot of noise benefits to adjacent businesses and residents. You may have been driving on the freeway and seen a project where driven piles are used, and that involves dropping a hammer to pound a pile into the ground, and that can be very, very noisy. This type of pile, a cast and drill hole pile, is drilled and augured into the ground, so during construction, there'll be quite a bit less noise compared to other foundation types. The existing bridge has a number of supports within the railroad right-of-way. This one will just have one support right in the middle and then 2 supports or abutments on either end. The south abutment will be just south of State Street, and the north abutment will be just north of the horseshoe access road that loops underneath the bridge, similar to how the bridge is configured today. There'll also be retaining walls located on the east side of Central Avenue. We're keeping the west side where it is today, and then we're widening to the east about 30 feet. So we'll be installing some retaining walls to preserve the local roadways like the Horseshoe Access Road and Central Place. So those 2D views are something that us engineers enjoy and can visualize, but I think it'd be best to show you what this would look like in the real world. So here's a view of the existing bridge from the air. We're in the southwest corner looking northeast, and you can see the existing 4-lane bridge with a number of supports in the railroad right away. And if we click, you'll see a rendering of the proposed bridge here. So here we've got proposed 6-lane facility with sidewalks and bike lanes on both sides, and a single support within the railroad right away that may require a crash wall to be crash protected. So this would meet all of the roadway and railroad standards and provide a wider 6-lane facility. So the next key component I wanted to discuss tonight is how we're going to stage construction in order to maintain traffic on Central Avenue at all times. And so we think maintaining at least 1 lane of traffic in each direction is key here. And so the way that this will be staged is first by shifting traffic over to the west side of the existing bridge while we demolish the east side, or the right side on your screen here, of the existing bridge. That will allow us to construct the eastern half of the new bridge. And then in stage 2, on the next slide, we'll shift traffic onto the right, onto the east there, onto the new bridge, so that the remaining portion of the existing bridge can be demolished. The new bridge will be completed, and then 6 lanes of traffic will be open. We're currently in the environmental phase of the project. Projects of this type need to comply with the California Environmental Quality Act. And because it's federally funded, it also needs to comply with the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA. Under both CEQA and NEPA, the project is categorically exempt because it removes a bottleneck by matching the 6-lane configuration of the roadway to the north and the south, and it's a replacement of existing infrastructure. So compared to a new development or a new bridge, which may require environmental impact report, this process is a bit more streamlined using a categorical exemption. Along with the CE, the categorical exemption, we're preparing a number of technical studies to evaluate potential impacts from the project. And those studies include noise and air quality reports. It includes historic property and archaeological resources, and looking at hazardous waste, or what's called an initial site assessment. As part of the environmental process too, we also have conducted Section 106 consultation, and that includes outreach to local libraries, community development departments, and other agencies, just to check if there's any historic buildings, district sites, or archaeological sites of significance within the project area. Caltrans also consulted Native American groups, and the findings of all these consultations and technical studies are that the project is not expected to have any significant environmental project impacts. So we're close to concluding this phase, and we expect to receive environmental approval within the next few weeks. This project will also require the right-of-way phase. There'll be some property acquisitions required in order to construct the project, and those may include roadway easements for the widened portion of Central Ave, temporary construction easements, or TCEs, for the construction of retaining walls and sidewalk improvements, and utility easements for any underground and overhead utility relocations that need to be relocated because they're in conflict with the project. For those properties that are impacted by the project, the city is going to notify the property owner about the easements necessary to construct the project. An appraisal will be prepared, and an offer of just compensation will be provided to the property owner in order for the city's contractor to use the property. Since the project is federally funded, the right-of-way process will follow the Uniform Act. Many projects that are federally funded have required right-of-way and have undergone this same process. So it's very defined in terms of how the appraisal should be conducted and how the property owner is compensated for their property. So the next steps of the project are complete the environmental phase. As I mentioned, we're very, very close on this, and we expect to receive environmental approval within the next few weeks. Following that, we'll initiate the right-of-way phase. The city intends to procure a right-of-way consultant who will work with affected property owners to prepare appraisals and offers of just compensation. Along with the right-of-way phase, we'll be preparing plans, specifications, and estimates in the final design phase that the city can use to procure a contractor to build the project. The design phase and the right-of-way phase and the environmental phase are all funded, but funding has not yet been identified or has not been yet secured for construction. We have some funding identified, and the city is working with Caltrans local assistance to allocate highway bridge program funding for construction. But in the meantime, we may be looking for other state, local, and federal funding sources in order to get this project into construction in late 2022. So depending on funding availability, we're looking at starting construction at the end of next year. And throughout this process, through all these phases, we will keep you in the loop and conduct additional public outreach meetings. And if you want more information on the project, I'll turn the presentation back to Stacy to let you know how to stay involved.
Thanks, Eric. So we have a project website that is available with more detail on the project, as well as some resources that you could download and take advantage of. The website does offer Google Translate to easily translate to an appropriate language. So great feature there. We do have the project fact sheet that has the project overview and details. It includes the schedule and contact information for Noel Castillo to gain more insight into the project. The frequently asked questions, or FAQ document, is also available on the website, and you can download it. Both the fact sheet and the FAQ documents are available in Spanish on the website. And for all of those interested attendees who want to stay informed and be part of our project updates, you can go ahead and submit your contact information, including your email address, on the project website. And go ahead, if you want to be added to the email list, go ahead and add a note into the comments that you're interested in being added to the email list, and we'll keep you updated and abreast for future public events, as well as any email notifications that we send out with updates on the project. And for that, we will move on to Q&A. And at this time, you can go ahead and use the Q&A icon in the Zoom platform and go ahead and submit your questions.
So I suspect as you're brainstorming your questions here and submitting them, we'll get them all compiled. But I think what we might do is just go through some of the frequently asked questions while you're submitting your questions here. So Stacy, how about we start with some of the FAQ, and then we'll move on to some of the live audience questions.
Sure, great idea, Eric. I'll start with a first question. What is the Central Avenue Bridge Replacement Project? And to respond to that question, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Noel Castillo.
Thank you, Stacy. So what is the project, and what's the project all about? So the city of Montclair is partnering with the California Department of Transportation, also better known as Caltrans, and the County of San Bernardino to replace the Central Avenue Bridge over the Union Pacific Railroad. And it actually also spans State Street, which runs parallel to the railroad tracks. As we heard Eric mention, this is an older bridge. It needs to be replaced. So it's an inevitable thing. And as we do so, we're going to be making for a better bridge that's wider, that is more of a complete street, that isn't as car-centric. We'll be looking at adding sidewalks on both sides of the street and adding bike lanes. So as most bridges do, they bring two parts of the city together and bring us back together. I know that the railroad bifurcated the city into two parts and kind of alienated the south part of the city from the north side. So this bridge is a very important project to bring us back together, and we want to do it safely so our kids can walk and bike to school over the bridge.
Thank you, Noel. Great answer. The next question that we have is, why is the project being considered?
As we mentioned before, the existing bridge constructed in 1967 is approaching the end of service. As Eric mentioned, no reason to be concerned. It's still a workable bridge, but we know that we need to plan ahead and make sure that we make the replacement in a timely fashion. We were successful in obtaining Highway Bridge Program funds to do the replacement. So obviously it is warranted for the replacement. We do still have some funds to identify for the construction. We don't have a fully funded project for construction, but we are funding for the design of the project. So there's the replacement bridge will support current and future capacity needs and adding additional lanes of traffic in both directions, addressing the safety concerns and improving the commute to travel times along the important thoroughfare for us.
Great, thank you. Next question is, who is involved in the project?
As we mentioned, this project is going to have lots of challenges, and it's logistically a very challenging project. So that the city of Montclair is the lead. This project does have federal funds. So the state is the administrator of the program, the Highway Bridge Program. So they are involved in administering those funds. The federal government is involved since we're getting funding from the Highway Bridge Program. The county is involved. Some of the right-of-way that is being impacted, some of the properties being impacted on the southwest end of the project limits, it's within the county. We are looking to partner with other metropolitan transportation agencies like SBCTA, which is the San Bernardino Transportation Agency, which we're hoping to team up to identify additional funding for the project. And again, it's a very complicated project in the sense that we need to deal with the railroad, which doesn't take time off to do construction. So there's a lot of stakeholders at hand, including the residents and the property owners that we want to work with very closely to make sure that we minimize the inconveniences. So if you do own property or a business nearby, you want to sign up to our project website so we can further coordinate with you, get to know what is important to you, what business, what your maybe operation hours are. So we start thinking of that in provision in our contract to minimize the inconveniences that we may have for your business or residents.
Thanks, Noel. And I'm understanding that we're having a little bit of a issue with our Q&A feature. So for any participants that want to ask a question, please use the raise the hand feature, and we'll go ahead and unmute you and get your questions asked. Another question that we have is, how can I stay informed or get involved? And we want to point you in the direction of the project website at centralavbridge.com, where you can find more information about the project. You can download the fact sheet or the FAQ document to get more information. You can also submit your questions and your information so we can follow up with you at a later time via the website. We will also post updates to public meetings and other events that we might have available for participation options. Another question we have is, what is the anticipated timeline for the project? For that, I will turn it over to Noel.
Thank you. And actually, before we, I guess I could get into the response. I saw a hand raised. So I can either start the response, or if we want to see if we can allow the person to ask the question. John, do you know if we'll be able to unmute the participant with the raised hand? All right, as we work through those technical difficulties, let me answer that. So as far as the anticipated project timeline, as we had mentioned a few years back, we started a feasibility study that took about a year to prepare. That allowed us to put together a request for proposal for design services. We brought BCA on board to start the design. We're well into the design phase. We're getting into the final design stages, and we're hoping to have a complete package that we can then put out to solicit bids from contractors to start the construction phase in mid-2022. The construction duration would start in the summer of 2022, and typically a bridge like this probably would take about 2 years to build, if I'm not mistaken.
Great. Thank you. And I want to go ahead and remind people, if anyone wants to ask a question, please go ahead and use the raise the hand feature and we can get you off mute and allow you to ask your question.
Hello, I don't see anyone raising their hands at the moment.
Very good.
Great. Thanks, John.
And I guess I'll take this opportunity to mention to some of the participants, if you are like me, sometimes I'll probably be a little intimidated to ask questions during a live meeting. So if you want to email us or just sign up through the website to get updates, just so we have that point of contact. And maybe when you wake up tomorrow, you'll think of a question that you want to ask. So please do sign up to get our updates, or make sure you write down our email address so you can contact us by visiting the project website. And you never know, you might, if you feel more comfortable giving us a call later on or emailing us, whatever you prefer as the vehicle to submit your question, please make sure to do so. It will only make the project more successful if we know what are some of the concerns and questions that might be out there.
It's a great reminder, Noel. Thank you for letting people know how else they can. When you have those moments where you wake up in the middle of the night, you forget to ask, that's always a good reminder to know what you can do about those questions. So we have a few more questions that we can go through while we work to get our Q&A feature working for you guys. So the next one is, what are the benefits for the project? And I'm going to turn that one over to Eric from Biggs Cardoza to answer.
So I think there's both direct and indirect benefits. Clearly, I think there's a benefit from widening the bridge to 6 lanes. It'll reduce vehicle congestion, and like I mentioned, the vehicle congestion often comes with a impaired ability for emergency vehicles to respond quickly. So that, along with just relieving your daily commute, the ability to get emergency vehicles around our roadway system quickly is quite a nice benefit. Then the other direct benefits are things like improving the state's infrastructure card. I know that's been a hot topic in the news recently with a potential large federal investment in infrastructure coming up. So there's quite a few benefits from that perspective. There's also some indirect benefits, and that's jobs created and the ability to have a public works project that produces a lot of work for laborers, material suppliers, all locally and all across the country. So I think this project has both pretty significant direct and indirect benefits that will be realized during and after construction. It also has the benefit of improving access for pedestrians and cyclists. I know when we've been out there walking the site and we've had to get across to the west side, it's been quite a challenge. And a lot of times you don't want to try to walk all the way down to the crosswalks. So having sidewalks on both sides is key, and having dedicated bike lanes on both sides is key. So it's a lot of great benefits that replacing this bridge will offer.
Sounds like a great improvement upon what we have there now. So very excited. What are the estimated costs of the projects and how will it be funded? I can go ahead and pass that on to Eric or Noel, whichever one of you wants to take this one.
I'll give Noel a break. So right now our preliminary cost estimates are coming out to about 30.2 million. That's the project all inclusive, including environmental and engineering services and construction. So that's the cost that we're carrying and trying to get funded here. We'll get a little more clarity on the costs as we refine our design and as we see how the market reacts to the pandemic. Right now, there's been a massive spike in prices for timber and steel, just due to some of the backlogs and shortages caused by the pandemic. So by the time this project gets into construction, hopefully that'll all be evened out, and it'll be a competitive bidding market where contractors are looking for work, material prices are down, and so we just want to carry a conservative number at this point. I think the other part of that question was how will it be funded? So right now we've got Highway Bridge Program funding. So that's federal funding that's administered by Caltrans local assistance. There's also some local funding like the gas tax, and there's a number of state sources that we're seeking as well. Some of the Senate Bill 1 funding sources that the other gas tax, the statewide gas tax, are potential candidates for this project. So we're working together with the city and some of our local representatives to actively seek funding to get this project built.
Great, thank you for that. One of the tough questions that we have that people always want to know when you have construction projects is, are you taking my property? And that's a question I will go ahead and let Noel take.
Thank you. So I think semantics do matter. When someone asks if we're taking their property, so the city would never take property. So we have to go through a very standardized process, and we acquire the property through, especially on a project like this that does have federal funds, we have to go through the federal process, Uniform Act process of obtaining right of way. And so there's very standardized process that you go through. You have to make sure that you provide a just compensation. So nowhere would someone be left not made whole for any of the property that's acquired. And there's a lot of communications with the property owners to find out what is it about their property that needs to be assessed in order to make sure that if there is, I don't believe in this project we're going to have any relocations or full acquisitions, but in the case there was, for example, if you have a residence that's near a school or there's close to a shopping center that you really like, we would seek a relocation that meets those standards. But in this case, this project I think has minimal impacts, and once we get into that phase of final design and we start identifying the impacts, will be in close contact with all the property owners. And if you're not the property owner, maybe you're a tenant, we'll also be contacting you to make you aware of the potential impacts, to make sure that we work together closely with you to work out any of the negotiations.
Noel, thank you very much for fielding that very difficult question. Moving on, what are the impacts to my business? Will my business be shut down during construction? And I'll go ahead and pass that one over to Eric to answer.
Certainly. So this happens a lot in public works projects where you're either reconstructing a bridge or building sidewalk, and it has the potential to impact driveway and sidewalk access. So the city intends to procure a right-of-way consultant, and that right-of-way consultant will be working directly with the property owners. And what we do as the engineering team and as the designers is we meet with the property owners that are impacted to figure out how their business operations, or if it's a residence, what times a day are they in and out, to see what we can do to structure the project such that the impacts are as minimal as possible. So for example, if you have a business that operates from, let's say, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., we might specify rapid setting concrete or some solution to construct the driveway in a manner that you have access at all times during business hours. So our approach on this is going to be, once we've identified all the right-of-way impacts, is to meet with impacted property owners and figure out what their operations are like, so we can see what we can do from an engineering perspective to minimize and mitigate any impacts.
Thanks, Eric. And for this moment, I'm going to take a moment to pause and ask John if there are any hands raised, any questions that we can take live right now.
There are no raised hands at the moment.
Great, thank you. We can continue on with some other questions that we've received. Next one is, will Central Ave be shut down during construction? And I'll let Eric go ahead and take that question.
Excellent. So I think if you look back in the presentation, you'll see that we had some slides on staging. So we are reducing Central to 1 lane in each direction, but we do not intend to shut down Central Avenue at any point during the construction. So you'll have one northbound lane, one southbound lane. Now, obviously, we understand that creates a bit of a bottleneck. It still allows traffic to flow through and access the local businesses and residents and streets. But what we do is we prepare a transportation management plan, or it's called a TMP, that looks at detour routes and alternate routes around the project site, so that if this 1 lane configuration does become a bottleneck, there's alternate routes that are publicized, and there's signs and things like that to direct non-local traffic around the project site. So the simple answer is no, Central will not be shut down. But the more complex answer is that there will be both Central Ave and detour routes will be available to make sure traffic flows through the region.
Great, thank you, Eric. Another question that we have is, why are you prioritizing this project now when projects on the I-10 and Monte Vista are still in progress? For that, I will go ahead and pass it to Eric again.
Good question. It feeds nicely off of the previous question here. So I had mentioned we prepare a traffic management plan. That plan also considers any ongoing adjacent projects. So the analysis as part of that report may result in upgrades, temporary upgrades to intersections that are outside the project limits. So not just the intersections of Central and Holt and Central and Mission. And so these intersections may be temporarily upgraded in order to keep traffic flowing throughout the city. And those temporary improvements may include modifying some of the signal timing or striping dedicated turn lanes or measures of that nature. So even if there may be some big regional projects ongoing, the goal of our analysis is to make sure that we can make adjustments at the intersections to keep traffic flowing throughout the city.
Great, thank you, Eric. Another question for you. Shouldn't this project be undertaken in phases after COVID-19?
So I think by the time we get into construction, hopefully the pandemic will be no longer an issue. But I think what's important is once funding is identified for a project, it's important to use that funding. And so right now we have Highway Bridge Program funding. If we're successful in pursuing grant applications and getting other federal, state, and local funding, a lot of times that funding comes with a deadline. So it's really important to use that funding as soon as it's available. So I think just by the nature of the timeline, we'll be in phases after COVID-19, but we want to make sure we move on this when the funding is available to get this bridge replaced.
Great, that makes sense. What safety measures will be in place during demolition and construction?
We'll have traffic barriers to protect motorists and cyclists and pedestrians on the bridge while we demolish and build new portions of it half and half. Any of the bridge demolition activities have to be conducted in accordance with Union Pacific Railroad requirements. And so protecting trains underneath during demolition may include some demolition shields, or oftentimes the railroad will hold trains back while some of the superstructure or the part of the bridge that supports the roadway gets removed. So there's plenty of measures in place to ensure safety of people on the bridge and below the bridge.
Great. Another question we have is, will this project negatively impact air quality?
So as part of our environmental documentation, we prepared an air quality report. And that air quality report was prepared according to all the CEQA guidelines, and it looks at vehicle emissions both before and after the project. And we did not identify any significant impacts as a result of the project. The project was taken to a group called the Transportation Conformity Working Group, or TCWG, And TCWG concluded that this is not a project of air quality concern, is the term they use. So upon reviewing the appropriate studies, they determined that air quality is not a concern for this project.
Great, thanks. One more question. Will the new bridge include lighting?
Absolutely. Similar to the existing bridge that you can kind of see on screen right there, we'll have street lights likely mounted on the barriers on either side of the bridge, and that'll provide adequate lighting for vehicles and pedestrians and cyclists.
Awesome. I want to take a moment to ask if there are any raised hands that we can answer questions for.
There are still no raised hands at the moment.
All right. Well, we've gotten to the end of our Q&A for tonight's meeting, and I want to turn this back over to Noel Castillo from the city.
Thank you very much. So that concludes our meeting tonight. I want to thank everyone that attended. Once again, if you have any other questions, please reach out to me through the project website, or you can always email me. Thank you once again, everyone. Thank you to the team for the presentation, and thank you to everyone for participating and allow us to present the project to you. So thank you, everyone, and you have a good night.